Welcome to the Copperfield Electric Podcast. Right now, behind the drywall of the room you are sitting in, there is enough raw energy pulsing through copper wires to literally burn your house to the ground.
It is a lot of power, yeah.
Yeah.
And we just sort of ignore it.
Right. We trust it implicitly because, well, it's hidden. You flip a switch, the lights come on, and you just go about your day. But what happens when that invisible infrastructure starts to quietly fail?
What is the million-dollar question?
Yeah.
Because it does fail.
It does. And your home actually has a hidden language, like a way of physically communicating when things are working perfectly and, more importantly, when things are going dangerously wrong. So today, our deep dive is completely dedicated to decoding that language.
Which is incredibly important for anyone listening right now.
Exactly. We are pulling from this really detailed field guide by Renee Hernandez. It's called Signs You Need Emergency Electrical Services ASP. And we're combining that with decades of practical field data from Copperfield Electric. They're a premier 24-hour electrical service out in Southern California.
Yeah, they've seen pretty much everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the specific warning signs your house might be giving you, I feel like we have to establish a baseline. Like, what actually separates an annoying electrical quirk that you can ignore for a week from a full-blown emergency where you need to evacuate the living room?
Right. So the defining factor is really the presence of an active hazard. I mean, we rely so heavily on electricity that we often forget we are basically living inside a giant machine.
That is a wild way to think about it.
But it's true. And like any machine, when the core components start to fail, it creates immediate danger. So an emergency is basically any situation posing an imminent active risk of fire or bodily injury right in that exact moment.
So it's like medical triage, essentially. A single dead outlet in the guest bedroom is like a stubbed toe.
Exactly. Or, a circuit breaker that trips maybe once every 2 years because you ran the vacuum and the hairdryer at the exact same time. That is non-urgent.
Right. You just put that on your Saturday to-do list. Schedule a standard repair.
Yeah. But if you smell burning plastic at 11 p.m. or your whole house is aggressively surging and dimming, look, the risk doesn't magically decrease just because the sun goes down. That is an active hazard requiring an emergency response.
I gotta say, though, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the danger of the breaker situation. If my breaker trips, isn't that a good thing?
It is a good thing the first time.
Right. I mean, it did its job. The power is cut and the danger is gone. Why is it considered an active hazard if I just go down to the basement, flip it back on, and go back to watching television?
Well, that is probably the most common and, frankly, the most dangerous misconception homeowners have.
Right.
Yes, the circuit breaker is your home's primary safety device. When it trips once, it is doing exactly what it was engineered to do.
Okay. So why shouldn't I just reset it?
Because we have to look at how a breaker actually works to understand the danger of just flipping it back on. Inside that little plastic switch in your panel, there is typically a mechanism called a bimetallic strip.
A bimetallic strip. So two metals.
Literally two different types of metals sandwiched together. And as electricity flows through your circuits, it passes directly through that strip.
Oh, I see. And when you overload the circuit, like, say, plugging in too many space heaters in the winter, you are forcing too much current through that little metal strip.
Precisely. And what happens when you force excess current through a wire? It generates friction, right?
Right.
And that friction generates heat.
Okay, that makes sense.
So as that bimetallic strip heats up, the two different metals expand. But they expand at different rates. This causes the strip to physically bend.
Oh, so it bends until it triggers something.
Exactly. If the circuit is overloaded, it bends so far that it triggers a spring, physically breaking the electrical connection. That is the actual click you hear when the breaker trips.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah. So when a breaker trips, you have to understand that the metal inside it is physically hot and bent out of shape because of a serious thermal event.
Wait, okay, so when I immediately force that switch back into the on position without diagnosing the problem, I'm literally forcing a hot, bent piece of metal back into a live circuit.
You are.
Huh.
And more importantly, the physical problem that caused the heat in the first place.
Yeah.
The crossed wire, the failing appliance, the melting insulation inside your wall, that is all still there.
Oh, man. So it's just going to happen again.
Right. If the breaker immediately trips again, it is screaming at you that there is a severe fault it absolutely cannot clear on its own.
It's warning you.
Yes. When you continuously force a breaker back on, you are actively bypassing your home's safety mechanism. You are forcing electricity back into a compromised environment, generating more and more heat inside the wall cavity, and drastically increasing the risk of an electrical fire.
So the house is actively trying to protect me, and resetting the breaker over and over is basically dismantling the smoke alarm while the kitchen is on fire.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that makes total sense. This brings us to how a house physically communicates this kind of danger to our senses. Let's talk about the smell test.
Ah, yeah. The smell test is crucial.
Because Hernandez's guide points out that a burning smell with no clear source is one of the most critical red flags. What exactly are we smelling?
Usually, you are smelling the physical deterioration of your electrical system's defenses. It's often described as this fishy, plasticky, or acrid odor near an outlet, a switch plate, or the main panel.
Wait, fishy, that's so specific. Does the copper wire itself smell?
No, copper wire doesn't really smell when it gets hot. What you are smelling is the protective PVC plastic insulation wrapped around that copper wiring. It is actively melting. Or, even more concerning, you might be smelling the results of an arc fault.
Okay, I've heard that term, but let's break it down. What is an arc fault, like mechanically speaking? How does a wire just start burning if it's tucked safely behind the drywall?
So an arc fault occurs when an electrical connection becomes loose or compromised.
Right.
Now, air is normally a fantastic insulator, right? It stops electricity from flowing freely.
Right.
But if two wires inside a wall are just a millimeter apart because, say, a screw came loose over 20 years of tiny vibrations, the voltage can become strong enough to push electrons right through that air gap.
Through the air? That's crazy.
Yeah, and when electricity jumps through the air, it ionizes the gas, creating a localized plasma arc.
So it's essentially a tiny continuous lightning bolt firing off inside the wall.
Exactly. And plasma is incredibly hot. I mean, a sustained arc fault can generate temperatures of several thousand degrees. It instantly melts the surrounding plastic insulation and begins to heat up the wooden framing of the house.
Wow, several thousand degrees inside the wall.
Yeah. And according to the National Fire Protection Association, electrical failures are the third leading cause of home fires in the U.S. What's fascinating here is that the vast majority of these fires do not start with some spectacular visible explosion in the middle of your living room. They start silently.
Because all that intense heat is trapped in a dark, enclosed space.
Yes. The arc fault smolders unseen inside the dark cavities of your walls. It feeds on decades of accumulated dust, dry cobwebs, and the dried-out wood framing.
It just turns it into charcoal, basically.
Exactly. It essentially turns the wood into char. And the terrifying thing about char is that it conducts electricity even better than fresh wood.
Oh, so it just feeds itself.
Right. A fire can smolder inside a wall cavity for hours, just slowly building intensity before a single flame ever breaks through the drywall and becomes visible to the homeowner.
So by the time you actually see the fire...
By the time you see it, it has already established itself inside the structure of the house. That acrid, fishy smell of melting plastic is often your one and only early warning system.
That is genuinely terrifying, but it highlights exactly why you can't just open a window to clear the smell and go to sleep.
Absolutely not. Do not do that.
It's not just about smell, though. The documentation also dives into sight and touch. We're talking about visual cues, like dark scorch marks around the plastic of an outlet, or visible sparks when you plug a cord in.
Right, or actually getting a physical electrical shock from your appliances.
Yeah, let's start with the visual ones. What do scorch marks really mean?
Scorch marks are the undeniable visual proof that severe overheating has already occurred at that specific location. The heat inside the junction box was intense enough to literally burn and discolor the thermoset plastic of the outlet faceplate.
So if I see brown or black streaks on an outlet...
You have to assume the wiring behind the wall is in even worse shape. You stop using that outlet immediately. You don't just, plug a power strip into it to hide the burn mark and pretend it's fine.
People definitely do that, though. And then there's the touch aspect, which I find really common but deeply misunderstood.
Oh, absolutely. People dismiss it all the time.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, because people often dismiss a tiny little tingle from a toaster or a metal lamp as just static electricity or, a quirky old house. But the data shows that tingle is actually a ground fault.
Yes, and dismissing it is basically playing a dangerous game of roulette. A ground fault means the electrical current has somehow escaped its designated insulated path and is traveling where it shouldn't.
Why does it do that?
To understand this, you have to remember that electricity is always endlessly seeking the path of least resistance to the earth, like to the ground. Under normal conditions, your home's wiring provides a safe, heavily insulated copper highway straight to the ground.
But if that highway's broken, say, the insulation inside the toaster has frayed, and a live wire is actually touching the metal casing of the appliance.
Then the metal casing becomes electrically energized. It's just sitting there waiting for a path to the air.
And then I walk by.
Right. When you walk up barefoot on your tile floor and touch that metal toaster, your body suddenly becomes the most efficient path to the ground. The electricity flows out of the appliance through your hand, down your body, and into the floor.
Wow, so that tiny tingle you feel is raw alternating current literally passing through your nervous system.
Yes.
Which means the only reason it was a tingle and not a lethal shock is just dumb luck regarding the resistance of my skin at that exact second, right?
Exactly. It's just luck. A small shock today is merely a warning that the insulation has completely failed. The underlying fault that caused that tiny shock can easily degrade further over the next 24 hours.
So tomorrow it could be way worse.
Tomorrow, that exact same toaster could deliver the full 15 or 20 amps from the circuit. And to put that in perspective, it only takes a tiny fraction of a single amp to stop a human heart.
That's sobering.
Yeah, a physical shock from an appliance is a sign of a deeply compromised system that needs immediate intervention.
Okay, so we've looked at localized issues. One outlet smelling bad, one breaker tripping, one appliance shocking you. But we need to move on to broader, system-wide failures.
The big ones.
Yeah, this is where the symptoms aren't confined to a single room. It's when the whole house starts acting possessed.
Systemic failures are a totally different category because they point to issues at the very heart of your electrical infrastructure.
Like what kind of symptoms?
We're talking about situations where the lights are flickering or aggressively dimming across the entire house simultaneously. Or maybe a sudden total power outage on a perfectly clear sunny day when you can look out the window and see that all your neighbors still have their power running just fine.
Right. If it's just one lamp flickering on my desk, maybe it's a loose bulb or a bad switch.
Exactly.
But if the kitchen overhead lights, the living room lamps, and the bedroom ceiling fan all dim in unison when the air conditioner kicks on, that points to a massive bottleneck somewhere.
Yeah. A great way to visualize this is to think of your electrical panel not as a breaker box, but as the main water valve for your entire house.
Okay, a water valve.
Right. The utility company is supplying a massive high-pressure pipe of electricity to your property. Your electrical panel is the valve that distributes that pressure to all the different little pipes, the circuits throughout your home.
So if that main valve is messed up,
If it's failing, or if the connection where the utility line meets your house is loose and corroded, the total pressure available to the house drops. So when a heavy appliance like an AC unit kicks on and demands a massive gulp of water, so to speak, the pressure drops everywhere else. That's why the lights dim in every room.
it's a structural failure at the source. And the research also explicitly flags exposed wiring as a system-wide emergency, right? Like from an abandoned DIY project in the garage or rodents chewing through the protective insulation in the attic.
Oh, yeah. Exposed wire is an immediate, non-negotiable emergency. There's zero protection against moisture, dust buildup, or accidental human contact.
It's just sitting there waiting to happen.
Exactly. It is a live, uninsulated conductor just waiting to either arc fault against a piece of wood or deliver a lethal shock to anyone who brushes against it.
So let's put the listener in this scenario. It's a Saturday afternoon. They suddenly smell melting plastic in the hallway, or their lights are aggressively surging and dimming across the whole house. What is the immediate practical survival protocol while they wait for emergency help to arrive?
The protocol is entirely about containment and safety. First, if you can do it safely without touching anything warm, sparking, or damaged, go to your main panel and turn off the affected circuit or the main breaker if you have to.
Just cut the power.
Yes, cut it. Second, unplug appliances near the problem area to completely remove them from the equation. Third, establish a physical perimeter. Keep children and pets far away from any exposed wiring or scorching walls.
And there is one point that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. Never use water on an electrical fire.
Never. It is a deeply ingrained human instinct to want to throw a bucket of water on something that smells like it's burning. But you must fight that instinct.
Because it makes it worse.
Way worse. Standard tap water is full of minerals and dissolved salts, making it highly conductive. If you throw water on an active electrical issue, the current will use the stream of water as a direct path straight back to you. You will be electrocuted.
So what should they use?
Use a Class E fire extinguisher if there are visible flames. Furthermore, if you smell burning, but you cannot locate the source to shut off the power, you must leave the home immediately. And of course, if you see active smoke or flames, bypass the electrician entirely and call 911.
Treat the invisible energy with the respect it commands. Now, to truly understand why these systemic emergencies are happening with such increasing frequency, we have to look at the fascinating geographic and historical context the data provides.
This part is really interesting, yeah.
The field insights focus heavily on Southern California, specifically Orange County, so places like Tustin, Anaheim, Irvine, and Santa Ana. There is this massive generational clash happening behind the drywall of these homes. It's basically a battle between mid-century architecture and modern technology.
Right. The risk profile of older homes is the driving factor in many of these emergencies. I mean, a huge percentage of the homes in Orange County were built during the post-war housing boom in the 1960s and 1970s.
The Brady Bunch era.
Exactly. The electrical panels and the copper wiring installed inside those walls half a century ago were designed for a radically different world. When a house was built in 1972, the electrical system was engineered to power a refrigerator, a few incandescent lamps, a single tube television, and maybe an electric toaster.
Which is light years away from a modern household. We're talking about homes that now have a central heat pump, 2 home offices running dual monitors, an air fryer, a microwave, and, an electric vehicle charging in the garage.
Yeah. And to understand why this causes fires, we have to look at the math of amperage.
Let's do it.
Amperage is basically the volume of electricity flowing through the wires. A typical home built in the 1970s might have been outfitted with a 100-amp main electrical panel. That was plenty of volume for 1972. But today, a modern level 2 electric vehicle charger can demand 40 to 60 amps continuously.
So a single device in the garage is instantly eating up 60% of the entire home's electrical capacity.
Exactly. Add a modern heat pump that pulls 30 amps, an induction stove pulling 40 amps, and you don't even have to do the rest of the math to see the problem. You are mathematically overloading the infrastructure.
There's just too much volume.
The demand radically exceeds the physical capacity of the copper. This generates massive amounts of excess heat, which degrades the 50-year-old insulation, which leads directly to the arc faults and melting plastic we discussed earlier.
This generational clash perfectly leads into a concept in the building world called the 612 rule, which I think is a brilliant way to visualize this struggle.
Yeah, the 612 rule is key.
Right, because the National Electrical Code has a strict standard for modern homes. There should be no point on any wall that is more than 6 feet from an outlet, and outlets should be spaced no more than 12 feet apart from each other.
And the underlying purpose of that 612 rule is entirely safety-driven. The code is designed to virtually eliminate the need for homeowners to use extension cords.
But if you live in one of these older homes in Orange County, your house absolutely doesn't meet that modern code. You might have 1 outlet per room. So I kind of look at it like this. An older home's electrical system is like an ancient Roman road system.
I love this analogy.
It was beautifully built, meticulously engineered for horse-drawn carts and pedestrians. But now you are trying to route thousands of modern commuter cars, semi-trucks, and SUVs through those tiny cobblestone streets every single day.
It just doesn't work.
Right, because the permanent infrastructure isn't there, homeowners start creating their own detours. They use cheap power strips and daisy-chained extension cords snaking under rugs just to get power to their home office or entertainment center.
That is an incredibly accurate mechanical analogy. Extension cords are only manufactured for temporary use. The wires inside a standard extension cord are incredibly thin.
Thin wires mean more resistance.
Yeah. When you force a high amperage load, like a space heater or a window AC unit, through a thin extension cord, it creates massive friction. The electrons are bottlenecking. That friction becomes heat.
And if it's under a rug?
If that cord is buried under a rug or pinched tightly behind a heavy sofa, that heat has absolutely nowhere to dissipate into the air. It just builds and builds until the cord melts and ignites the rug. Attempting to bypass the physical limitations of an old home with extension cords is a guaranteed recipe for a fire.
So when the ancient Roman roads of your home's electrical system finally buckle under the pressure of modern life, who is actually equipped to handle the crisis? This isn't a job for a neighborhood handyman.
Definitely not.
This is where our field data from Copperfield Electric becomes so relevant. They are positioned as the definitive family-owned solution for this exact type of generational infrastructure failure across Southern California.
Yeah, when you are dealing with the kind of active hazards we've discussed, the credentials of the person you call are paramount. Copperfield Electric isn't just a generic contracting service. They are highly trained, fully licensed professionals.
And their license number is 1094740, right?
Correct. They are fully bonded and insured, which protects the homeowner. Crucially, every single electrician they dispatch is background checked.
That is a big deal.
Huge. When you are panicked, smelling smoke, and letting a stranger into your home at 2 a.m., that background check provides an immense amount of psychological peace of mind. They also back their engineering work with a 100% satisfaction guarantee and operate on a model of honest pricing, explicitly stating they will only diagnose and fix a problem if it truly exists.
And their footprint is massive. If you are experiencing a catastrophic panel failure, they service a huge swath of Orange County. We're talking Irvine, Costa Mesa, Anaheim, Santa Ana, Mission Viejo, Newport Beach, Tustin, Huntington Beach, Orange, Fullerton, and Laguna Beach.
Basically everywhere in that region.
If you live anywhere in that footprint, they are your local lifeline. And the key detail here is their true 24/7 availability. Because as anyone who has owned a home knows, an electrical fire doesn't politely wait for Monday morning.
No, a burning smell doesn't pause for the weekend. But it's also vital to understand that a top-tier electrician isn't just a reactive force.
Oh, for sure.
While they are available around the clock to stop an active hazard, their true expertise lies in proactive modernization. They handle the complex panel upgrades required to bring those 1970s 100-amp homes up to a modern 200-amp standard.
Getting you ready for the EVs.
Exactly. They safely install dedicated circuits for EV chargers, perform comprehensive home safety inspections, and execute new construction wiring, including the complex load calculations required for accessory dwelling units, or ADUs.
It's the fundamental difference between calling the fire department to put out a blaze versus hiring an engineer to make sure the building is entirely fireproof in the first place.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. The main takeaway from today's deep dive is simple but profound. You must respect the invisible power running through your walls. It is a tightly controlled hazard that requires maintenance.
Routine maintenance, yes.
Never, ever ignore a burning plastic smell, even if you can't find the source. Do not ignore whole house flickering and stop continuously resetting a circuit breaker that refuses to stay reset.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, relying on your senses to detect a problem, waiting until you can smell melting plastic or feel a shock, is actually the absolute last line of defense.
You don't want to get to that point.
No. The true goal of homeownership is to never reach the point of a sensory alarm. The data strongly recommends that if your home has not had a professional electrical inspection in the past 5 years, or if you live in an older home and have recently added modern appliances, you need to schedule an evaluation.
It just makes sense.
It is about proactively ensuring your home's infrastructure can safely handle the demands of modern life without putting your family at risk.
Absolutely. So, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you walk through your house today. Think about the oldest, most ignored outlet in your living room.
We all have one.
Think about that tangled web of dusty extension cords currently hidden behind your heavy entertainment center or your home office desk right now. Is that aging 1970s wiring silently struggling behind the drywall to power your 2026 lifestyle?
It's a scary thought.
It's definitely something you need to consider before you plug in one more device. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay safe, respect the grid, and we'll see you next time.